Hello and welcome to a Literacy Strategies Professional Development for Western Kentucky University Light Course 527. According to Ernest Bond in his book Literature and the Young Adult Reader, selecting developmentally appropriate reading material is one of the key concepts stressed in reading methods courses. Yet we subject even the youngest of teens to literature which in the past was read primarily by elite educated adults. This comes from Chapter 2, page 62. We also need to consider which strategies are going to make these books accessible to the readers that we are providing them to. We can use strategies such as retelling, bridging, pairing classic novels to new novels, showing books to films and discussing the differences, looking at class reads and literature circles. But outside of these, we need to consider the literacy strategies that we're going to have students use and teach them in order for them to really gain knowledge and understand the content. So, in this professional development, I'm going to focus on vocabulary strategies because a lot of my students do struggle with vocabulary. We're going to look at strategies and tools for vocabulary that include online resources as well as your simple pen and paper resources. The online resources I want to look at are Flocabulary and Pear Deck. And then we'll look at Foursquares, visual vocabulary cards, breaking down learning target vocabulary, word sorts, and alpha boxes. And any of these strategies can be used in a classroom or a library setting. So Flocabulary is the first online tool that I want to look at. They do provide a 30-day free trial. They provide a lot of cross-curricular activities. They can be interactive and printouts. So if we look at a simple lesson that they give. This one is for language arts, research, and study skills, and it's called To Ode the Librarians. You can see that they offer a video, vocabulary cards. So each of these vocabulary is broken down. There's a vocabulary game that they could play. It's taking a while to load, sorry. There's a read and respond. So reading a text and then answering questions. There's a quiz that they can take. So if you give them grades for things, this would be an activity to grade on. And then there's a lyric lab that could be used either in the library or an ELA setting, or if somebody's just working on literacy in the classroom. So writing a rhyme and trying to write at least 4 words. There's also a handout that you can download, and it gives you this printable activity. This one is Loving Librarians and 5 questions you'd like to ask the school librarian. So I really like Flocabulary. It's put out by Nearpod, and it does give you a lot of access to different lessons that you could use in a classroom. The next that I want to look at is Pear Deck. Pear Deck is one of my favorites. It's free. You can create vocabulary lists, or you can select pre-made vocabulary lists depending on the age or grade range that you're teaching. You just click on the grade and it pulls up vocabulary for you. So that may work a lot in the elementary when you're doing spelling or vocabulary lists. Here on the right, you can see that I have created a vocabulary list. These are library terms and definitions. These are terms that were pulled from the Flocabulary vocabulary, so combining some of those online tools. It is integrated with Google, Merriam-Webster, and Gimkit, and I really enjoy that you can import lists or export, and you can even share with other people. Like I said, Pear Deck is integrated with Google, which makes it really simple because we're a Google district. So as soon as I created Pear Deck and started working on programs, it created a folder in my Google Drive for me to access, and it saves all of my files there. And then when I started working within their vocabulary section, it did the same thing. It created another file and saved the vocabulary list that I created. So you can see here 2 vocabulary lists that I've created for my high school classes. The high schoolers and middle schoolers still think this is so cool as compared to writing vocabulary out on a piece of paper. So once you sign into Pear Deck, it will give you a code that you share with the students. Normally, I just project it on my board. Students sign in using that code, and then it automatically splits them into groups and gives them a partner, which saves me a lot of time. and then kids aren't pairing with their best friend when you let them pick on their own. It gives the list of vocabulary terms that you've already put in with the list of definitions. And then a student has to draw a picture based on the definition, and the other writes a sentence using the term, and then they flip flop spots. And then when students submit it, it drops onto the screen, and you can kind of see them going by on a conveyor belt. When you're done and everybody's done their list of vocabulary words, you can go in, and I typically do it as a large group portion of class, that they all go through the words with me as a large group, and we accept or we deny people's work. So if they draw a picture and it doesn't really have to do with the vocabulary word, then you deny it and you move on. Or if a sentence using the term is really good, then you just accept it and it goes on. And I believe at the end it will let the students save those that work so that they can go back and look at it later on. The next tool I want to look at is called Foursquares. You can do this for each vocabulary word. You could assign different kids vocabulary words. There are a million ways to change this up. But basically, they're using 4 squares around a vocabulary word. They're going to write a definition. They're going to use it in a sentence. They're going to do synonyms and antonyms, and they're going to illustrate what the word means. A lot of times when I tell them to illustrate, they can either draw a picture using the term, or they can draw whatever comes to their mind when they think of the term first. I've also changed up the definition portion a little bit. A lot of times I do have them write that dictionary definition or the textbook definition, but then I also make them rewrite the definition in their own words. So not using it in a sentence, but just rewriting it in their own vocabulary. So here's a student exemplar of a Foursquare. You can see that the student's done the picture, the definition, the synonyms and antonyms, and used it in a sentence. This is a really good example of a Foursquare. Then we have the word parish. Again, in the Foursquare, you can see that they've done all 4 squares. It does not have to be in a specific order as long as they are doing all 4 parts of the worksheet. Now, for my high schoolers, this sheet may be divided into 4 different words. So they would do a word in this corner, this corner, and this corner, just because they're typically not going to write this big on a piece of paper. But for elementary students, this completely works. The next thing we're going to look at is visual vocabulary cards. Students need to see things over and over again for them to remember them. So for these, it's students get 1 vocabulary word, and basically they create a mini poster for it. The poster represents the meaning of the word when seen from a good distance away. I like to use these when I'm creating word walls, whether that's for a unit or the year or however you do that. So examples, this is hanging in a elementary classroom. You can see that the picture drawn for the word is going to help the student figure out what it means. Okay. You can also see that these are some of the words that they used in the Foursquare. So again, we can compound some of these tools so that students are definitely remembering what these words mean. The next is petrify. I really liked this student exemplar because they're using those emojis that they love so much, and they're even changing the font so that it looks spooky, just like the word means. And then we have this solitary image where it's one single person out by themselves. So you would really understand what those 2 words meant if it was hanging on a classroom wall. The next thing I want to look at is learning target breakdowns. So in our district, learning targets must be written up somewhere that the students can see it throughout the entire class period. Teachers are required to post learning targets for every content area or class that they teach. So I teach 6 periods. I have to have a learning target for each of the 6 periods. Students have to write these down. We want them to understand what they're learning each class period. So they write the learning target, and then we've started asking them to score themselves on how they feel about the understanding before we ever begin. So on a 1 to 4 scale, 1 that they don't understand at all, and 4 that they completely understand, they're going to rate themselves before we break down what that learning target means. So here you can see 2 examples of learning targets and how we're breaking them down. We're using boxes and squiggles and circles and arrows so that students can see which part of the vocabulary that we really want them to understand. So for instance, the word travel also means to move, and then the word material is referring to solids, liquids, gases, it doesn't matter. So when we're talking about sound waves, they need to understand they're going to move through different materials. Students probably have not seen the words internal and external, but they have seen the words inside and outside. So by writing those off to the side, students can then start to understand that those are synonyms for the same thing. They may not understand adapt or environment. So again, we're just going to give a small definition or alternate meaning of those words for student to understand, so that at the end of the class, when I go back, I would know that this is exactly what I'm learning today. The next strategy I want to talk about is word sorts. So word sorts are exactly what they sound like. Students get a set of vocabulary words, and then they need to categorize them or sort them into groups. So on the top left, you can see there's a picture up there. That might be a closed sort. So students would be given those top categories that they need to sort the words into, but then all the words are shuffled up and they need to figure out where they go. Or you can do an open sort, like the top right picture, where maybe this is a lower elementary class and maybe they end up sorting them by what letter they start with, or animals and not animals. They could sort them however they wanted. So students are given a series of words. They can work in small groups or individually. Teaching high school, I typically just print the words out on a piece of paper. If you're going to reuse them again, you can always laminate. And then I just ask the groups to sort the cards. Basically, I give them no information. As an open sort, you give them no background, and they just sort them however they want. It's really cool to see what kind of creativity the kids come up with. Then after the initial sort, you can share out with what they've come up with. And then a lot of times I have them read a passage from where the vocabulary is pulled from. This allows them to reevaluate and figure out what they're looking at. So this is a student-led lesson, which is awesome where I come from. So you're looking at discussions, collaborations. They're going to have to address misconceptions after they read, and then we can have a really good discussion and follow up before we leave the word sort. So student example of students sitting with their words and sorting them into categories. The last strategy I want to talk about are alpha boxes. They can be used K through 12. It's basically just a graphic organizer listing the alphabet, and then students are going to write in vocabulary that they know from prior knowledge, and it's going to allow them to build. So they can work individually, with a partner, or in a small group. This is an example where a 5th grade class read a book about sharks. They wrote on sticky notes and stuck them on the laminated sheet, but every word on there had to do with sharks. So as the follow-up activity, I want you to please print this link. It's going to print you an alpha box sheet. Then fill in any vocabulary that you would expect to see from an excerpt from To Kill a Mockingbird. Once you're done with that, you can give yourself a time limit of like 5 minutes, read the attached excerpt, and then add additional vocabulary on your alpha box sheet. Normally, you would then work with a partner or group to compare or add to your alpha box sheet, but we obviously can't do that in this PD. So if you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas, please reach out and contact me. It's kendall.coleman967@wku.edu. Sorry. Hope you had a great day. I've had a really hard time recording these videos, so thank you for sticking with me.